This was originally meant to be a Patreon tutorial.
Give me your money.
But then I decided, in the club, we all fam.
Oh, yeah!
So today I'm going to be exposing my watercolor process for all of you. Hopefully by the end of this, you're a pro at watercolor. The technique I'm going to be discussing in this video is called wet on wet, and it's how I'm able to achieve such nice blending effects. In case you were wondering, yes, that is Victor from Arcane as a dragon, because that's kind of my thing, you know. I went through my own glorious evolution trying to find an app that will allow me to drag my voiceovers while editing, because a certain someone decided to charge a kidney and a liver for using their app. I guess the business model really leaned into that cap there. Anyways, we don't hold grudges. Now, let's get back on topic. The whole idea behind what I'm doing here is that you wet your paper first and let the colors do their thing. The beautiful thing about watercolor is if you mess up while splashing like this, you can easily just fix it by adding some water. Stay with me, I know that looks scary. Don't tell a trusted adult just yet, because we're going to get some tissue paper and pretend like it mostly never happened. I say mostly because it's less tragic if you're going to be covering that area with a different color, which we are, so I'm not too worried about this. Now let's get some clean water, and this is very important, just cover the area that you want the colors to bleed in, because if you put water in an area you don't want that color, you see how it's just going over to where the water is? That's gonna happen where you don't want it to, so just wet the area you want colored. Now you can leave it like a little fading effect, you see there, but I'm going to be adding some much darker colors. See, this is where most people realize watercolor is not for them, because you cannot control the outcome of this. I personally am very mentally stable, so I like the unpredictability of the result. And I feel like this way the art is kind of, you know, deciding what it wants to look like. I'm cooperating with the colors, I'm not telling them what to do. Another very important thing, more so than the colors you're using, is the paper. You need good quality paper that can hold a lot of water, because if you don't, it's going to rip. So don't let me ever catch you on the street using printer paper to do watercolor. Do you think printer paper would survive that? I don't think so. Speaking from personal experience, of course. What I should also warn you about is that watercolor tends to dry much lighter than when you initially put it on. But don't make the mistake of going too dark at first, because you can't reverse that. It's better to gradually darken your colors than to just mess it up in the beginning stage. What you can do if you add too much color on accident is just drag it by adding clean water to your brush and pulling the pigment down, just like I'm doing here. That can also be used for a nice gradient. I ultimately decided I don't like how light it is here, so I ended up adding some more. Don't be afraid to wait until your paper is completely dry. You can always add more layers if you're not sure. I just know from experience about what it's going to look like. But you know, I overestimate or underestimate many times. If you ask any watercolor artist if they know what their result is going to look like, if they tell you that they do, they're lying. I have massive respect for people who only use watercolor in their paintings, but I personally like some level of control over the outcome. So I tend to combine many mediums, my favorite being colored pencils, of course. I often joke about how atrocious my paintings look without the colored pencils. There's nothing quite as humbling as those raw edges, which is why I have to cover them up. If you're wondering what kind of colored pencils I'm using, I use Faber-Castell Polychromos. Is that how you say it? I have no idea. I probably butchered that. And Kohinoor Hardetement. You know what? This word This video is not sponsored by any of them, but you know, if they are interested, they can hit me up. Cheap colored pencils work just fine if you're only using colored pencils. I already made a video comparing cheap versus expensive colored pencils, so I'm going to leave that in the description for you to watch it if you're interested. But since I'm layering them, I need them to be more pigmented so that they show up at all. The reason I add colored pencils after I'm done with the watercolor is because they would smudge if I put them underneath. It's not like line art in a sense that it would stay and not smudge underwater. Don't make the mistake of buying a fine liner that is not waterproof. I made that mistake before. Just wanted to preface that here. In case you want to do it the other way around, it can be done. I personally don't like the way that watercolor covers it, but it may just be because I'm using student grade watercolor. I don't use expensive brands for that, only for the colored pencils. You can see how nicely this light green layers on this dark color. That would not be done with a cheap brand. If you're gonna do this, it's very important that you wait for your watercolor layer to dry completely, because if you do this on wet paper, it's going to rip regardless of the quality or thickness of the paper. If you're impatient and can't wait for your paper to dry, I've seen some people use a hair dryer to dry their layers. I haven't personally tried that, so I can't speak for how it works. If you want to add in some bright highlights you might have lost in layers, you can use mediums such as white ink, or I've seen people use gouache as well. I'm using white ink, but I've been considering using gouache for a while. I've also recently started mingling with digital art. That's something I'm going to be talking about a little bit more in a different video, so stay tuned if you want to know more about that. And since I started the video with the topic of Patreon tutorials, you can find those on my Patreon, of course, along with exclusive sketchbook tours and other content you can't find anywhere else. It's a fun little way for you to support what I do. And if you enjoy listening to me, you're gonna get to hear me a lot more. Not to mention that you have access to an exclusive chat where I can give you personal advice on your art. And if you're trying to post your art on social media, I can also give you advice on that, putting my personal fumbles to good use by helping you. But that's only available for 30 people a month. So if you want to secure your spot, I would hurry up if I were you. That brings us to the end of this little tutorial. I hope you learned something new. Don't forget to subscribe for more. All of the links for where you can find me are down in the description for your easy access. And I'm gonna see you later. Bye!